Hi everyone. Sort of elitist Datto here to talk about Salvation's Edge on both normal and contest mode. After Root of Nightmares last year, I truly thought that the idea of the hardcore having a day, or now 2 days, to themselves was pretty much over. While the environment and the space and the scale of Root were phenomenal, the encounters, not so much. As we've power crept forward and things have gotten easier, so too, I thought, the raids would be as well with this new era of raiding. While Crota's End was a rather big step up, it was a reprised raid and thus isn't exactly held to the same standards. Bungie heard that feedback from the community, or maybe at the very least me, cracked their knuckles, dropped this raid, and then flipped us off and said, okay, how about this? And promptly annihilated everyone. We went from record high clears in Root to numbers we haven't seen since Last Wish. Numbers that I never thought we would see again. So, what happened? Well, besides Verity, what happened? I'll tell you. It's the demand for perfection. This was the most punishing raid experience I think I've ever been a part of, and that is because of the final shape debuff timer on basically every encounter. You had to be perfect every time. You had to get the maximum of everything every time. You could not afford to be less than perfect. You could not afford to lose res tokens. You could not afford to miss 15 seconds on the clock. You had to be perfect or damn near close to it, and you had to do it quickly. New sponsor alert. This video is sponsored by Delete Me. Delete Me. No, not what you want to do when you find out exotic class items only come from a 2-player mission. Delete Me helps you keep your personal data just that. Personal, by going to hundreds of data broker websites to get that information removed as much as possible. It feels like every other week we hear about data breaches and passwords leaked and information hacked, not to mention every company under the sun trying to sell your data. Delete Me's goal is to remove your information from search results as much as they can. The first time my wife Danielle used the service, she had hundreds of pieces of information removed from over 70 different creepy sounding websites. And her first name is Travel. Okay, try removing the word travel from the internet. I have 45 of my own removals in progress as we speak. You simply tell Delete Me what to delete and they're gonna go around the internet removing whatever they can for you. So if you want to shield yourself from the living horror that is the internet, you can save 20% off of a Delete Me US plan by going to joindeleteme.com/Datto and using code Datto at checkout. That's joindeleteme.com/Datto using code Datto. Thank you very much to Delete Me for deleting me from the rest of this video. That was stupid. Don't include that. Okay. Datto. We've had encounters with timers in the past. Most encounters fail you after a certain amount of time. What's the difference now? The difference is combat. I would say from Deepstone Crypt up until Root of Nightmares, maybe even Crota's End, enemies were simply not a threat. You would just walk all over the enemies. I remember spawn killing enemies coming out of doors in King's Fall. They simply were not enough of a threat, which meant that doing mechanics never really felt that bad because the two experiences were split. Combat never felt like it interrupted mechanics. Combat never felt relevant. It was just something you did because it happened to be there. And yet with Salvation's Edge, we went from a Tormentor in Root of Nightmares being little to no threat at all to the stasis version of a Scion being one of the scariest enemies I've ever seen. Combat and mechanics have emulsified. Combat is something you had to take seriously, or it would get in the way of doing mechanics, or worse, cause your death. I cannot remember the last time, even in a contest mode raid, that running out of res tokens was going to be one of the big problems that my team would encounter. Up until recently, the moment you had mechanics on lock, you were pretty much going to clear that encounter within the next couple of attempts. Encounter 1 teaches you about the plate mechanic, which does eventually get abandoned by the time you reach the witness. You send charges back and forth between the plates, but you only have a small window to do it. Failure here results in a subjugator, but not on the very first miss, only if you have a chain going. On contest mode, a subjugator wasn't impossible to deal with, but it was still a pretty significant problem. The whole run is going so much slower in the first place because enemies are just naturally harder to kill, and dealing with an extra subjugator is just really not ideal. However, it wasn't like you were literally down to the second on this encounter. I mean, my team on our first clear were finishing cycles with over a minute still on the clock, but that's because we had to keep up the intensity the whole time. You had to go full throttle the whole time. The failure points here were simply having to occasionally be on your own and having to deal with a room full of enemies spawning in. This was probably the shortest or second shortest encounter for many teams though, as opening encounters tend to be. On normal mode, it's obviously not as stressful, but I still actually enjoy this encounter quite a lot because there's still a lot of movement, there's still a lot of slaying, there's not a lot of waiting around or downtime, so it always feels like something is happening, even if what's happening is you running in a circle. On both versions, it still comes down to knowing the plate mechanic though, and because the timings are so unforgiving, if you don't have a lock on what you're doing, you're never going to succeed. If you spawn too many subjugators and you waste too much time, you're not going to succeed. You still need to know what to do. You still need to make callouts, even on normal mode. The second encounter is the Herald of Finality, and this ended up being a much greater problem, not because it was a damage check, at least for my team it wasn't, but because you had to value your own life so much, and one small thing could kill your run. No joke, we had a wipe probably one plate rotation away from a kill. That happened because my grenade launcher wasn't reloaded. That was the whole thing. I didn't reload my grenade launcher. Those attendants spawned in, I wasn't ready for them, and I died. Those enemies are so lethal, even playing on the right side of the arena. Definitely the easiest of the three. I still had issues staying alive because if you got spawned on and you weren't immediately ready to kill those enemies, it was just over. And they spawned in randomly, so you never knew which configuration they were going to come in. And this was on the easiest side. The other two sides have it way worse, and dealing with the enemies was so brutal. And if someone didn't have a res token, forget it. You had to wait until the other people were done before you were going to get up. And you had to match the intensity of the first encounter as well. I've never had to play my life this much in a raid, probably since Last Wish. It's been that long that I've actually had to consider the enemy a threat. So much of one that most of my energy was spent on immediately finding where enemies were and just nuking them ASAP. It was brutal. This encounter was like I am completely washed, I'm ass at this, why am I even on this team moment for me, really. Like, I was ready to hang up the uniform because of this fight on day one. I've never had a fight make me feel like that in 10 years. Even on normal mode, this place has its holdups. The ads can cook you on normal mode. When was the last time that was a reality? Normal mode, I'm worried about dying to stasis scions. It's crazy. Still an enjoyable encounter though. Definitely not a gimme. That's another thing I'll get to. Or, I mean, I'll just say it right now instead. No fight in this raid is a gimme, except unironically maybe the Witness, unless you cannot grasp the concept of left, right, and jump, which is a crazy statement, and then maybe encounter 3. Every fight has something that is quite reasonable to mess up, or fail, or have miscommunication, at least this early in the raid's life, where you're still maybe running with different groups, and there's different callouts and strategies and experience levels. Maybe when we get a little more time under our belt, I'll think a little bit differently about it. Third encounter, even in the contest mode, it was kind of a gimme. This took way less time than encounter 1, mainly because the concepts were the same, you were just in different rooms as you did it. I don't have a lot to contribute here. It's just like, take the rooms from encounter 1 and then bend them into a straight line, and that's like 90% of it. Sure, some of the crisscross stuff can create some confusion, but there are multiple ways of handling the callouts for it, and I think this will get straightened up in a couple more weeks. Really, Datto? Straightened up during Pride Month? Alright, moving on. Encounter 4, the Vault 2.0. mainly known as Verity, because that's what it's called. I always had a feeling that Bungie was going to do something with bringing Guardians back to life, or having to rescue them, or doing something with ghosts. And I'm very glad that they did. It was cool to see the return of a puzzle encounter. Again, the last time we really saw something like this was Last Wish. And I think that experience helped with this one, because we knew that whatever we were thinking of, it had to be kept somewhat in reality. Like, no Wikipedia, don't go off the deep end, and our scout had heard of teams just doing that. Like, just really going off the deep end with their ideas. Remember, this has to be somewhat reasonable for the non-hardcore crowd to complete. People were stuck here for hours and hours and hours trying to figure out what to do, to the point where I think there was actually some amount of collaboration going on between some of the scouts of different teams. Like, it was that much of a puzzle for people. Eventually, we ended up getting through after, I want to say, over 5 hours here. I think this encounter design is a bit more enjoyable than the Vault, which has 2 callouts you need to make, and then you just kind of go on autopilot for 2 to 3 minutes. Here, you got 3 people in their own rooms trying to coordinate, but then I guess in the main room, you just have 1 person doing the whole thing, and then maybe making callouts to others to help. Otherwise, the other 2 people are just slaying out. For a puzzle fight, I guess that's okay. For other encounters, not as much. This fight is also going to be a massive holdup for a lot of teams as they start to learn the mechanics here. The Shadow Realm players actually have very simple steps. Get your shapes, and then pass them out to other people, and then pick up the shapes that the other people just pass to you. Like, it's really straightforward when phrased in that way. Like, I just saved you 19 minutes of watching my guide. But I can understand how it's easier for the normal Realm player who is doing the mechanic to get things a little twisted if you're still building familiarity. I mean, hell, I still get things a little twisted without a cheat sheet, but there ain't no rule against a cheat sheet. I also really like that part of the mechanic here is literally having to figure out what people look like. Never did I think, okay, who has Snake Ghost or who has the beanie on would be legitimate callouts in a raid. And then we move to the Witness. When you boot up the Witness encounter for the first time, you are given 0 direction at all. Usually when you start a fight, you have some vague idea of what needs to happen to continue. With this fight, almost nothing, which I actually think is quite fitting for such a character and such an encounter. It's just chaos on the screen, and you have no idea where to begin other than the plate in the middle is probably where we're going to do something. So you piece things together one by one. Oh, this thing is immune. Oh, this thing can be shot. And slowly you piece things together. Having to shoot a shape based on the hand you shot is literal insanity of a mechanic. On top of then having to jump out of the way of an attack. When's the last time we saw something like that? The execution of multiple DPS cycles in a row with people being alive was the big issue. Although it was also the pure exhaustion of everyone on my team. We had someone playing with a migraine for like almost 2 hours after 28 hours or something in the raid. And normally when people are like mentally tired, I'm just kind of, you know, come on, man, regain, let's get it. Come on, come on. But as soon as it enters the physical realm, that's when I'm like, oh, we might actually need to stop here. Like, I also get migraines, and if you don't, it's like feeling your eyeball wants to pop, and it's very debilitating and painful, and the only way I can get rid of one is to take some meds, go to bed, and hope that it's not there when I'm up, and also just chug water. So my team came back after an 8-hour break and almost one-shotted it. It's crazy how much easier it ended up being, even on contest, with people the slightest bit refreshed. The still hunt drama was quite intense during these couple of days during the contest mode, still hunt being the new golden gun sniper. I don't think anyone is really mad that teams used it or that it was used in general. I think the frustration stemmed from Bungie not putting it on the ban list. It became very apparent very quickly how good this was going to be. I know a lot of teams wanted to see it banned, but alas, it was not. And if it's not banned, it's free game. This is one encounter where I do have somewhat of an issue though. On contest mode, ad clear is very important, and through the use of still hunt DPS, that left your power weapon open to being a machine gun, which was great to handle ads. As soon as my team switched to a non-still hunt DPS method, I think we tried sleeper for a couple of attempts, our ad clear capabilities plummeted since we were limited to just legendary non-machine gun weapons. Yeah, rocket sidearm did okay, but you can't use it forever without healthy ammo coming in. Anyway, so yeah, ad clear, contest mode, very important. Actually a lot tougher to do. So it becomes a role in the encounter. And I know that you can just have everyone running around as a glyph breaker trying to get their own buff, but it gets a little chaotic, and a lot of teams are going to prefer stability and control over going fast, especially when you get a healthy amount of time. On normal mode, though, this becomes basically the only fight in the raid where 3 people get to claim ad clear roles, and honestly, as someone who is normally a glyph breaker, I can also do ad clear at like 85 to 90% efficiency. Now, I am thinking of the fight in normal mode right now, so perhaps this wasn't even feasible to include in contest, but if I can just spitball here for a sec, I think it would have been cool to have the plates as a part of this encounter too, with people rotating in and out of the pool in the middle to clear stacks of resonance. The goal should be to get everybody involved. Everyone has a job that they can or should be doing. Again, I get that balancing an experience for contest versus normal mode is at least probably part of the design, but still. I think this is one of my only gripes about the experience on normal mode, is like you have 3 people doing a job and then 3 people just kind of goofing around. If people had ways of dealing enough damage, the Witness could have been soloed by now. I think that's the only issue that people have, is that you don't have enough damage. Speaking of damage, kind of, the Witness was a slight damage check. You only get so much time in Final Stand, so you need to come in with some ammo if you want to succeed here, which I think is good. Usually Final Stand is kind of a gimme with a lot of bosses, but this is one where it can be quite unforgiving. I do wonder what the results of the raid would have been if Still Hunt had not existed or was banned, since the first several teams cleared with Hunter stacking. The Witness was the first time ever in a raid race that I entered the raid during contest on something that was not a Titan, and very few teams cleared with Titans in their group, starting some questions on what the Titans' role is in a raid on top of their prismatic kit, which we'll talk about in a future video. I think my only other gripe would be that I wish we had another actual boss encounter. We had 3 non-boss, 2 boss, either flip that or make it like a 3-and-3 situation. I haven't even spoken about the physical design of this place, the space that you're actually in, and it's phenomenal. Yet again, the space is probably much bigger than some patrol spaces. It wouldn't surprise me if it was like multiple patrol spaces combined big. It's fantastically done. All the traversal sections really give a sense of how big this place is and how small you are. I love that feeling in this game. I've said it a million times, and Bungie dialed that up big time. It's great. Where does this raid and raid race go on a tier list? In terms of the raid itself, I'd probably put it at least in the, yeah, I'll run a couple tier. It's probably pushing into the Red Knight tier once I get a little more experience with it. I'm going to have a tier list of every raid encounter in the game sometime in the next month. Now that we're done with this era of the story, I'm going to be doing a ton of tier lists after I wrap up a lot of my Final Shape and Episode 1 content. So either get excited or I'm sorry. In terms of day ones, though, it's up there. My top 3 are Last Wish, Vault from D1, and Crota's End from D1. And a lot of those next 2 are because of nostalgia. Part of me wants to make this a 1A, 1B situation with Last Wish because they're both so similar and were so grueling. They were everything that I thought a day 1 raid should be. Unforgiving, brutally tough, demanding perfection. I don't know if I would want that to be the experience every single time, but considering I never thought we would get another Last Wish type experience ever again, I'm happy to have it one more time. The future of raiding is very unclear right now. The status of the next reprised raid is completely unknown. The status of the next new raid is even more unknown. It might be a while before we get any new or reprised raid content. My team was one glyph away from a potential top 10 finish. Our break that we took, our 8-hour break, caused us to slip to 105th place, but knowing that we were that close to bouncing back to a top 10 finish was very encouraging. I don't know the future of my team, though. I don't know if some people are going to retire from raiding, from the game, if people want to find a new team. That's something we'll discuss ourselves. But we knew that we wanted to stick together until this one, and I'm very glad we did. The boys toughed it out for 28 hours, with the longest break that we took being a bathroom break. I'm super proud of their willingness to stay around and stay committed. And if it weren't for actual physical body issues, I'm confident we would have gotten a clear much earlier. I considered retiring from the contest rating scene after this one, and I'm still kind of thinking about it. But I think in my heart of hearts that I know I'll always want to be on the cutting edge. I'll always want to be on a team that can compete for a top placement, for a belt. I never ended up getting a belt after 10 years of this, and competition has never been fiercer. But man, I got nothing to be ashamed about. I got 2 silvers. I got 3 bronze medals to my name. A lot of my teammates have a lot of medals. We got tons of top 10 finishes. Most people don't have a medal at all. Most people don't have a top 10 finish at all. So over this entire career of mine, contest rating, I still feel very accomplished. I want to thank all the people who came out to support the stream on this most recent raid race. All the people who subbed for the emblem at my stream. I was told that I'm in the top 10 most subbed channels on Twitch as a result of the raid race. And obviously I'm going to go back to like 9 millionth place or whatever in about a month. But to even be in that world is absolutely crazy, and I cannot thank you enough for it. I'll be uploading the full race at some point on my archive channel, but with all of the parts where you couldn't see gameplay chopped out, because it's just like there's no point. I think that's all I got on Salvation's Edge. Bungie kicked everyone's ass. I love it. I love that they still know how to do that. Again, not expecting this to be the situation every time, but at least I know they can still do it. They can still make something like this happen. So that's nice. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.